In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Now that is not just some dusty ancient quote. It's actually the anti-hero hook for one of the most violent, colorful, and frankly, fascinating historical records we have. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a dark, bloody history of outlaws, assassins, and seriously compromised strongmen. We are going to look at exactly what happens when a nation undergoes a total, structural moral collapse.
Specifically, we're unpacking the biblical book of Judges. This explainer is going to walk you through a wild 300-year case study of apathy, political compromise, and, surprisingly enough, unexpected divine grace. It is a stark, neon-flashing warning about what goes down when a society just completely abandons its foundational principles.
So here is how we're going to organize the chaos for you today. First, an era without a king. Second, the cycle of sin. Third, the flawed deliverers. Fourth, the downward spiral. And finally, number 5, the ultimate takeaway.
All right, let's jump right in. Part 1, an era without a king, a nation in transition. To really get the historical stage set here, you have to picture a nation in profound, chaotic transition. This is right after the death of Moses' great successor Joshua, around 1380 BC. For the next 300-plus years, up until the rise of King Saul around 1050 BC, it's a gap, a massive, messy gap. During this whole middle period, they had no permanent central government, no standing army, no consistent spiritual leadership. It was, literally, a free-for-all.
So what was the immediate problem? Well, they just didn't finish the job. Instead of claiming complete victory and driving out the entrenched inhabitants like they were told to do, the Israelites compromised. They settled for coexistence. They wanted the convenience of forced labor more than they wanted obedience to their covenant. And maybe the most tragic part? A whole new generation grew up that, as the text says, knew not the Lord. They completely forgot their own history. And without any central leadership to keep them anchored, they just drifted.
Which leads us to Part 2, the cycle of sin, the engine of history.
To understand how things went downhill so incredibly fast, we have to look at the underlying mechanism driving this entire era. The source material lays out what's called the cycle of sin. This isn't a one-off mistake. It's a brutal, predictable loop that repeats at least 7 times throughout the text. It's the absolute engine of this history, proving that a nation doesn't just collapse overnight. It collapses on a loop.
Let's break down exactly how this agonizing loop works. Step 1. Sin. The people abandon their covenant and start worshiping other gods, like Baal. Step 2. Servitude. Because they're acting just like their pagan neighbors, God essentially says, okay, have it your way, and they get sold into the hands of those exact enemies. Step 3. Supplication. The people cry out in total distress, though, let's be honest, usually because they want comfort, not because they're truly repentant. Step 4. Salvation. God answers by raising up a judge, a military deliverer to save them. And finally, Step 5. Silence. The land gets a temporary breather, but man, the second that judge dies, they slide right back to Step 1, and it's usually worse than before.
That brings us to Part 3, the flawed deliverers, assassins, outlaws, and cowards.
If you're coming into this expecting pristine knights in shining armor to come to the rescue, you might want to rethink that. The deliverers God raised up, these judges, were incredibly flawed, deeply compromised individuals. We're talking outlaws, cowards, even assassins, like Ehud, this left-handed warrior who literally smuggles a dagger into a king's summer palace to secretly assassinate him. And then there's Shamgar. The sources tell us he wiped out 600 Philistines using nothing but an ox goad, literally a farming tool. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Or take the story of Gideon. To put things in perspective, Gideon starts out as a frightened farmer, literally hiding inside a winepress to thresh his wheat because he's terrified of the Midianites. God calls him to lead an army, so Gideon manages to scrape together 32,000 guys. But then, God commands these severe military cutbacks, slashing that massive force down to just 300 men. Why? To absolutely prove that the victory was going to be 100% divine. Human strength had nothing to do with it.
But Gideon is such a fascinating bag of contradictions. On one hand, he earns this incredibly bold nickname, Jerubbaal, which means, let Baal contend. He gets this for bravely sneaking out at night and tearing down his own father's pagan altar. Huge move. Yet later on, this exact same guy takes the gold he won in battle and fashions it into a golden ephod. It instantly becomes a snare and leads the entire nation right back into idolatry. Talk about winning the war but losing the ultimate victory, right?
Okay, part 4. The downward spiral. Not a flat circle, but a descent.
Because here is the really crucial point. That cycle we just talked about, it wasn't just a flat circle where they kept returning to the same baseline. It was a devastating, generation over generation downward spiral. If you compare the beginning of the era to the end, it's night and day. You start with early judges like Othniel. He's presented as this near-flawless, model judge who actually followed the spirit and brought 40 years of solid peace. But fast forward a few generations, and you hit absolute train wrecks like Samson, a guy driven completely by his own fleshly appetites, constantly compromised, repeatedly breaking his holy vows. The leaders themselves were decaying right alongside the people.
Things get so intensely dark that the internal civil wars become just as deadly as the foreign invaders. Take Jephthah. He makes this devastatingly rash vow that results in him sacrificing his own daughter. And then he wages a brutal civil war against his own brethren, the tribe of Ephraim. Jephthah's forces actually set up blockades at the Jordan River and used the word shibboleth as a pronunciation test. If a fleeing man couldn't say it with the right accent, he was outed as the enemy and executed on the spot. 42,000 of their own people were slaughtered over how they pronounced a single word. Let that sink in.
And then there's Samson, who, honestly, perfectly captures the tragedy of this whole era. The guy possessed spectacular, spirit-empowered physical gifts. I mean, tearing a lion apart with his bare hands, striking down 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. Incredible stuff. But he completely lacked spirit-formed character. Zero self-control. His life is just a masterclass in the dangers of compromise. It shows exactly what happens when you pair immense power with profound moral weakness.
Finally, part 5. The ultimate takeaway. The need for a true king.
So, as we zoom out from all of these intense, frankly shocking narratives, what does a 300-year history of violence and apostasy actually teach us today? Well, the source material drives home a few core lessons. First, it is a vivid demonstration of the catastrophe of moral relativism, what happens when everyone just decides truth for themselves. Second, it proves that human leaders, no matter how gifted or charismatic, only ever offer partial, temporary fixes. Third, and this is wild, it highlights that God's sovereignty is so immense, he can and will use deeply flawed, weak, and sinful instruments to get his will done. And finally, this whole dark period serves one major purpose: preparing the nation for the absolute necessity of a true king.
Ultimately, the chaotic failures of every single leader in this book prove one singular point. Humanity desperately needs a permanent savior. Think about it. Every time a judge died, the peace died right along with them. That relentless, echoing refrain, "In those days there was no king in Israel," it's not just a passing historical observation, it's an anticipation. It's pointing way past these flawed individuals to the coming of an ultimate, permanent king. Someone who can actually change the hearts of the people, not just slap a band-aid on their political circumstances.
Seeing these incredibly deep parallels between this ancient text and our modern apathy, the shifting morals, the catastrophic results of moral relativism, it leaves us with one highly provocative thought to chew on. If our society today is living in a time where every man does what is right in his own eyes, are we basically living out the Book of Judges right now? It's a pretty sobering question to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the Book of Judges. Keep questioning and keep learning.